Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. And in this video, what I want to talk about is a very typical issue that people deal with when they are new to JavaScript. Okay, and it's generally going to be an issue you deal with like your entire life in JavaScript because it happens a lot. Okay, so first we're going to understand the error, which is the whole properties of undefined error. And then we're just going to talk about like diagnosing it. Okay, so I'm going to create like a script. So we'll just call this like undefined.js. So let's see here, like I'm going to declare a variable const cheeses. Actually, no, I'll say const animals. Okay, and that's going to be an object. And in that object we have cow, which goes moo. We have pig, which goes oink. But then we have dogs. And the thing with dogs is dogs, there's like big dogs that go rough. Okay. So now if I were to console.log animals.cow, okay, let's just start up a terminal and we'll do node. Actually, let's use bun. Why not use bun? Okay, again, if you're not familiar with bun, bun is just another way to run JavaScript files. So there's node, bun, and deno, which are sort of your main runtimes. Node is the big one, but let's try this. If I remember right, it's like, I think it's bun run undefined.js. See, moo. Okay, because I'm printing, there's the animals object. So this object is inside of the variable, and I'm printing its cow property, and the value of cow is moo. Okay, now watch what happens if I do animals.cat. Okay, but is there a cat in animals? No. So if I do that, I get undefined, because when it basically, it's kind of assumed that every property kind of does exist in the object. So basically, if you didn't explicitly define the property, it's undefined. Okay, or its value is undefined. Okay, so then if I say, hey, I want to get the cat's name, a cat, you know, a big cat. Okay, so animals.cat.big. Well, let's see what error we get. See, now I get this error. Okay, so it's saying the error we're getting is, oh, this is a bun, so I probably should use node, so I get the node specific error. Node. Okay, now if I do it in node, see, I get this error. Cannot read properties of undefined. Okay, and it's saying, hey, I can't read this big property. What it's saying is that, hey, this thing, whatever you're calling .big on, doesn't have a property called big. Okay, actually the thing that you're calling big on is undefined, and undefined should never have any properties. So really what it's telling you is not that there's something wrong with big. It's telling you that there's something wrong with cat. Okay, it's telling you that there's something wrong with cat. Okay, so really the thing I'd have to diagnose then is what's wrong with cat. Why is cat undefined? Okay, so the way I would do that is I have to go back and kind of figure out where cat is defined. Then now when I go back and take a look at this object where animals is defined, I can see that cat is not in there. Okay, and that's generally going to be the process you have to go through. So again, the issue isn't the property itself. So when it says, hey, I can't read big, it's really saying that the issue is really the undefined thing, which is cat, the thing that you're trying to get the .big of. Okay, and that's sort of the big hurdle. Like, you know, again, like I think deno and bun handle this error a little bit differently. So as we saw, like if we ran bun run undefined.js, see, they give you an error saying undefined is not an object. Okay, so this is a little bit clearer. So see, it's telling you like, hey, you're asking me animals.cat.big, something in here is undefined. Okay, so it's telling me, hey, I can't do that. Okay, it's actually still not as great an error. Let's see what deno does. Deno run undefined.js. Okay, and And then you get the same error there. Okay, cannot read properties of undefined. I actually do like this error better. Okay. So the way Node and Deno do it, I think once you realize what this is saying, it's just saying, hey, cat is undefined. So you need to figure, so basically it looks like you are trying to access a property of an object that isn't undefined. But just so you know, cat is undefined. So then I have to figure out what went wrong. Okay, and that's generally like the process. The idea is like, okay, now I have to go back and think, when would have cat been defined? Like when would have we put the object in here? Because something went wrong there. Okay. So let me go, now I go back and I add the cat. Okay, and then we have cat, and we have a big cat, and pretty much all cats go meow. Okay, but now what happens if I do cats? So another problem you could have is not that the property doesn't exist in the object, is that I might be calling it by the wrong name. So I'm still going to get the same exact error. So it's still saying, hey, there's a problem with a big property, but again, it's not the property that's the problem. It's the thing that I'm trying to access the property from. So really, I then look at cats. I'm like, oh, wait a second. No, it's not cats. It's cat. Okay, and one of the ways I would figure that out is I might go back and like console log animals. Like I would literally just diagnosing it. I would go one step at a time. I would then console log animal.cats. Okay, I would see that's undefined. And then I'm like, okay, well, if cats is undefined, let me go back one more step. Is animals undefined? Okay, wait, that's not undefined. And then, oh, it's cat, not cats. Okay, so that would be the idea. Whenever you're trying to solve an error, you're trying to work backwards. You're trying to say, okay, here's where the problem occurred. Okay, but first you have to ask, like, what do you expect to happen? Like, what should be happening? Okay, what should be happening is I should be getting a console log of meow because I expect that I'm accessing this big property on this thing called cat. So that would be like, okay, well, I see the big property. And then again, by using the console logs, I can see that, okay, I'm calling it by the wrong name. I was calling it by cats. Okay, now this gets more complicated when you're trying to do stuff where you can't really see the object. Like you're doing a submission of a form, you know, for like a server-side type thing. In that case, you might have to put console logs in the client when you know, or on the server. So basically, if the form is submitting directly to the server, then on the server, you might want to console log the request body to make sure that, hey, does my request body actually look like what I thought the form was generating? So that way I don't get this error. Okay. Or basically when you pass an object to a template, maybe you want to console, if you're getting this error, you might want to console log the object before you render the template. So that way you can see, hey, am I passing the object I think I'm passing to, and does it look like the way I think it looks like to the template? The idea is a lot of times you can't see what you're passing because the object's not an object you wrote out in your code. So I can't go to my code and look and see what that object looks like. So then I need to console log it. And then I need to console log it at different times because I need to kind of determine when isn't it defined, when may have it changed, and then you try to build that sort of timeline. Okay, there is a way to kind of make the error go away, but again, I wouldn't just do this. Like if I, so let me go back to animals.cats big. Okay, what I can do is I can use what's called the optional chaining operator. It's a newer JavaScript operator, not so new anymore. It was added in like I think 2019, 2020. I think 2020. It might have been 2021. Okay, but not too long ago. Okay, and essentially what you can do is you can put a question mark before the dots when you're accessing a property of an object. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm accessing the property cats, but by putting the question mark there is that if that property is undefined, then it doesn't drill any further. It just stops. It just, okay, it returns undefined. That way you don't get the error. So I'll never access big. It'll never even try to access big because cats is undefined. And then if cats is defined and then big isn't, it'll stop there. So what it does, it just prevents you from getting that properties of undefined error. So now if I run the code, I just console log undefined. This can be great if you're just trying to get rid of the error. The problem is now you're console logging undefined. If you know that it's supposed to be undefined, then that is fine. And like, okay, you know it's going to, like for example in React, oftentimes your initial state is going to have something that's undefined that'll be defined after an API call. So in that case, you're fine with that, and you just don't want to have to go through all these machinations to make it work for like a millisecond. So then you put these optional chaining things, and that makes your life a whole lot easier because the API call will be done soon enough. Okay, and then everything will work out just fine. But in other situations, I would say in most situations, this should not be your immediate, your go-to. The reason being is because you may want to diagnose what the problem is. You want to figure out why it's undefined. Another reason why you would use the optional chaining is for, let's say you're getting data from an API. There's like 100 objects you're looping over, and there's like a property that sometimes just isn't there. Like it's in 99 of 100 objects, but in one object that property just doesn't exist. Okay, instead of creating a whole bunch of if statements trying to say, well, if the property exists, then do this. Okay, just so that way you can handle that one item that doesn't have the property, you can use optional chaining in that situation to make your life easier for that one oddball object in the array that just doesn't have this property. Okay, that in situations like that, this is a godsend, because otherwise you'd be having to do all these if statements and say, okay, only first check if the property exists, and if the property exists, then do the thing you were intending to do, which could either mean an excessive amount of if statements or ternary operators. This can just be like, okay, do the thing. If the property doesn't exist, it just doesn't happen, which is great. So hopefully that gives you some context on this whole like properties of undefined error, and just sort of like where basically like how it works and how to think about it. Okay, when it comes to trying to solve it, so always work yourself backwards. Like, okay, well, if this doesn't work, let me console log this, and if that doesn't give me what I expect, then let me console log this, and then if that doesn't give me what I want, let me see, hey, where was animals defined? And you just keep saying, okay, where did that thing happen? Okay, where was that thing created? And let me go check, did it get created successfully? And you'll eventually find the problem in your code. The other thing you can do to kind of limit this problem is, again, test your code frequently. Okay, make sure that every few lines of code you're running some tests, running some console logs to make sure that the code you just wrote did what you think you did. So you declared a variable, console log that variable, even if you delete the console log right afterwards, just to make sure that hey, like this actually created the variable I thought it was going to create with the value I expected it to create. Okay. Bottom line is testing your code to make sure that your code is doing what you assume it's doing. So testing your assumptions is going to prevent you a lot of heartache, and then waiting till the end and then having to like climb this big mountain of different cascading errors or cascading mistakes that are intertwined and kind of hard to decipher where one begins and one ends. So you might fix one thing, but that wasn't the actual error, so you fixed it, but then when you fix the actual error, it breaks again because you fixed that other thing later. Like it becomes a real big mess. So always, you write a little bit of code, test it out. Write a little bit of code, test it out. And what do I mean by test it out? Write a console log. As you get deeper into the coding world, then you might want to write tests when you're writing bigger, larger pieces of code. Okay, I mean, just to kind of show you like a quick way you could test the thing. I would write something like a really silly test would be something. I mean, there's testing libraries, but built into JavaScript, you have this function called Java console.assert. And essentially what it does, it's going to take one argument, which is a Boolean expression, and then an error that you might want to pass if it doesn't match that. So I would say something like, hey, does animal dot cat. Okay, so we'll do two versions of this. One where it's just animal dot cat, and again, so you notice I'm just passing the variable. Okay, but again, any variable coerced as a Boolean expression is going to be falsy if it's undefined. So then it would value it as false. So if the variable doesn't exist, my assertion is then false, and it'd be like, this property does not exist, or we'll say the cat property doesn't exist. Okay, and then I can do another console.assert and then say, okay, property.cats, the cat's property doesn't exist. And if I run the code, okay, oh, it's animals. Let's try that again. Okay, and you see, like in this case, this assertion failed. Okay, it doesn't stop my code, it doesn't throw an error. I could throw an error if I want to, but the idea is I can get these little messages that tell me, okay, this didn't happen. Okay, so what I can do is I can just start inserting these assertions in my code and just saying, hey, if this variable exists, like this, and then if it doesn't, I can have a little message so that way I can kind of like assess, hey, when certain properties of objects didn't create. So I'm building in tests in my code to make sure like, hey, do I see when it's working, when it's not working? And then the cool thing about asserts, unlike console logs, they don't show up every time. They only log if there's a problem. Like they only log if this thing is not true. Whatever the first argument is not true. So you can kind of use that to say, hey, ring the alarms if something is wrong. Okay, so yes. My name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Have a great day and enjoy.